She had clung to hope, even in the darkest hours, believing that someone, anyone, was coming to take her away from the horrors that had consumed her world. It wasn't just a vague desire for safety, it was a deep, almost desperate instinct to survive. For countless people during World War II, that hope was a fragile thread, one they had learned to hold on to tightly because every day was filled with danger, fear, and uncertainty. When someone finally appeared and offered a lifeline, it felt like the universe was, for a fleeting moment, acknowledging their suffering and offering a chance at something better. For her, that moment seemed real, tangible, almost miraculous. She followed, thinking that the nightmare she'd been living in might finally be coming to an end. At first, everything about the situation seemed plausible. There were the uniforms, the authority in their voices, the careful manner in which they directed her movements. People in her condition, exhausted, disoriented, and traumatized, would naturally be inclined to trust figures of authority, especially when they presented themselves as guides or protectors. The small gestures, the polite instructions, even the way they avoided rushing her too quickly, all seemed to confirm what she desperately wanted to believe, that she was finally being rescued. And in a world where hope was a rare and precious commodity, it's almost understandable that she would accept that hope, even if her mind occasionally whispered doubts. But there was something insidious in the way the deception was carried out. This wasn't simply a case of someone lying to gain advantage in a moment of confusion. No, this was carefully orchestrated. Every detail of the rescue was designed to calm her, to make her believe she was heading towards safety when, in reality, every step was leading her deeper into danger. The killers understood the human psyche. They knew that in moments of extreme fear, a glimmer of hope can override rational thought, can make someone pliable, compliant, even cooperative. It was a cruel, psychological manipulation, a perverse form of control that preyed on her instinct to survive, turning her very desire to live into a trap. As they moved her from place to place, the surroundings might have seemed mundane, even unremarkable: quiet streets, empty courtyards, a few other figures in the distance. Yet each setting was carefully chosen, each detail intended to lull her into a sense of security. Perhaps she noticed something odd at times, a hesitation in a guard's movement, a strange silence, but by then, it was too late. The mind clings to hope, especially when faced with unbearable alternatives, and her thoughts of potential safety drowned out these subtle warnings. Every step forward reinforced the illusion. Every instruction she followed, every hand that guided her along the path, seemed to confirm that she was on her way to being saved. It's easy, from a distance, to imagine that someone in her situation might have sensed the truth, that the deception would unravel at some point. But the reality is far more complex. Fear, exhaustion, and the natural desire to survive can cloud judgment in ways that are almost unimaginable. The perpetrators of these horrors understood that perfectly. They exploited those very human instincts with meticulous precision. For her, what began as a flicker of hope became an all-consuming trust, and that trust, heartbreakingly, became a weapon against her. The cruelty of it lies not just in the physical danger she faced, but in the psychological manipulation itself. To be led to believe that salvation is at hand, only for that belief to be false, is a torment that stretches beyond the body. It attacks the very essence of what it means to hope, to believe in safety, to trust that the world can be anything other than a place of unrelenting terror. And in those moments, as she followed the figures who promised protection, every step carried her closer to a reality she could not yet imagine, a reality that would shatter every assumption she held about what rescue might look like. This deceptive rescue was not just a momentary act of cruelty, it was a microcosm of the larger, unspeakable horrors of the war. It demonstrates how, in the midst of unimaginable suffering, the human need for hope can be manipulated, twisted, and ultimately weaponized. For her, that day began with belief in salvation, with a fragile thread of optimism, and ended in a way that no one could have foreseen. The line between hope and horror, trust and betrayal, was crossed with terrifying precision, setting the stage for a revelation that would haunt her, and those who would hear her story, forever. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that relief was finally within reach. The fear that had gripped her so tightly over the past hours, days, or even weeks seemed to loosen its hold just enough for her to breathe. She looked around cautiously but with a fragile sense of optimism, hoping that the nightmare was truly drawing to a close. Every step forward felt like an affirmation of survival, a small victory against the forces that had seemed unstoppable. The people around her, the careful guidance, the seemingly calm environment, all of it reinforced the comforting illusion that she was being led to safety. And yet, deep in the back of her mind, there may have been a faint whisper of unease, a subtle, nagging sensation that something was not quite right. But in that moment, hope outweighed doubt, and she clung to it with every ounce of strength she had left. Then came the moment of revelation, the instant when the illusion shattered with a force so devastating that it left her reeling. She realized, slowly at first, almost unwillingly, that she was not being taken to safety at all. The world around her shifted in an instant from one of cautious optimism to one of unimaginable horror. The place she had been guided to, the place she had believed would shelter her from the chaos and cruelty that had marked her life for so long, was not a sanctuary, it was her own grave. The words themselves barely capture the weight of the experience. It was not just the knowledge of imminent death, it was the psychological and emotional blow of realizing that every step she had taken toward supposed freedom had been meticulously designed to lead her to destruction. It is difficult, even now, to imagine what must have been going through her mind in those moments. Perhaps she felt disbelief first, as if her senses were playing tricks on her, refusing to accept the impossible. Perhaps she searched desperately for an escape, for some overlooked path that might somehow lead her away from the fate she now saw so clearly before her. But as her eyes took in the scene, the truth was undeniable. Every detail, every element of the environment, confirmed the horrifying reality: this was where her life would end, and the people who had promised safety had been lying all along. The betrayal was so profound that it transcended fear itself, it became an existential shock, a rupture in the very understanding of what it meant to be alive, to be human, to believe that trust could exist even in small, fleeting forms. The realization must have come in waves, crushing yet fragmented. One moment she might have been struck by disbelief, the next by a surge of panic, the next by sorrow so deep it almost paralyzed her. And yet, within that emotional storm, there may have been a small, defiant spark, an instinct to survive, a desperate hope that somehow, by some miracle, she could escape this fate. It is in these moments, the most extreme and intimate confrontations with mortality, that the human psyche is tested beyond ordinary limits. The fear, the confusion, the grief, all intertwine to create a mental landscape more harrowing than anything she could have imagined. What makes this twist so particularly haunting is not just the deception itself, but the meticulous planning that preceded it. This was not a random act of cruelty, it was a calculated manipulation. Those who orchestrated this rescue understood exactly how hope could be used as a weapon, how the promise of life could be twisted into a tool for death. Every gesture, every instruction, every small act of seeming kindness was a carefully constructed illusion, designed to ensure that she would follow the path leading directly to her grave. The psychological precision is almost unimaginable, a terrifying reminder of the calculated cruelty that can arise in human conflict. And yet, even in the midst of such horror, there is a poignancy in the story. It reveals the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit, the ability to hold on to hope even in circumstances that are profoundly designed to extinguish it. It forces us to confront not just the atrocities themselves, but the way individuals experience those atrocities on an intimate, deeply personal level. In her eyes, in her mind, the shocking twist of discovery is not just a historical footnote, it is the core of her lived experience, a moment that defines the intersection of trust and betrayal, hope and despair. The moment she realized the truth is seared into memory not only because of the physical danger she faced but because of what it represents, a brutal lesson in the fragility of hope, the precariousness of trust, and the profound horror of human cruelty. It is a reminder that sometimes, the most devastating aspects of history are not the statistics or the names, but the individual moments of realization, the intimate confrontations with betrayal that echo far beyond the immediate circumstances. For her, that day began with hope and ended with revelation, leaving a scar that time could never fully erase, a story that history must remember not just for its tragedy, but for the humanity it illuminates amid unimaginable darkness. What makes her story all the more heartbreaking is that it was not an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger, systematic pattern of cruelty, one that defined the darkest chapters of World War II. To understand the full weight of what she experienced, we have to step back and consider the environment in which it happened, a world where fear, manipulation, and calculated violence had become routine tools of oppression. Millions of people were caught in the machinery of war and genocide, where individual lives were treated not as human beings but as obstacles, resources, or statistics. The very institutions and authorities that should have represented protection, order, and justice were often the ones orchestrating unimaginable acts of terror. For anyone in her position, the line between safety and danger was perilously thin, and trust could become a weapon against you in ways that are almost impossible to comprehend. During this period, the use of deception as a tool of control was alarmingly common. Entire populations were misled, coerced, or tricked into situations that appeared to offer reprieve, only to lead them into danger. For many, the promise of safety was a cruel illusion, one that exploited their most basic instincts to survive. The psychological manipulation was not incidental, it was intentional, a central component of the methods used by those in power. By presenting false hope, they stripped away resistance, sapped courage, and made compliance nearly inevitable. Her story is a haunting example of this broader phenomenon, showing how a single life could be ensnared in a meticulously crafted web of deceit and cruelty. But it is not enough to simply consider the mechanics of these atrocities. We have to see them through the lens of human experience, through the eyes of someone who lived it. Each person who fell victim to this system was forced to navigate a world where danger was disguised as safety, where the instinct to survive was weaponized against them. In her case, every step of her rescue mirrored countless other instances in history where individuals were led to believe that salvation was within reach, only to encounter betrayal at the very moment they allowed themselves to hope. It is this intersection of human vulnerability and calculated cruelty that makes her story so powerful and so devastating. At the same time, it is a reminder of the scale of the horrors of World War II. Tens of millions of lives were uprooted, destroyed, or extinguished in ways that defy imagination. The atrocities were not limited to the battlefield, they permeated everyday life, affecting civilians, families, and communities in deeply personal ways. The psychological toll, the trauma inflicted by fear and deception, was immense. What she experienced, the manipulation, the betrayal, the horrifying twist, was a microcosm of a global tragedy, a single thread in the vast, painful tapestry of human suffering during that time. Her story brings the enormity of history into focus, reminding us that behind every statistic is a life filled with hopes, fears, and dreams, all of which could be cruelly extinguished. It also forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the capacity for cruelty within human systems. The people who orchestrated these deceptions were not random strangers, they were part of organized efforts to control, dominate, and annihilate. The methodical nature of their actions underscores the chilling reality that horror is most effective when it is calculated, when it is planned with precision, and when it exploits our deepest instincts and vulnerabilities. This is why her experience resonates so profoundly. It is both intensely personal and unmistakably representative of a larger, horrifying reality. Yet, amidst all this darkness, her story carries a form of testimony. It is a reminder that memory matters, that bearing witness to such experiences is essential for understanding history in its full complexity. By recounting her experience, we confront the human dimension of atrocity, the way fear, hope, and deception intersected in ways that could define a life, or end it. Her story challenges us to reflect on morality, resilience, and the necessity of vigilance in the face of oppression. It is a testament not just to suffering, but to the enduring importance of remembering, of acknowledging, and of learning from the past so that the lessons it offers are not forgotten. In the end, her harrowing journey is both a singular narrative and a lens through which we can understand the broader horrors of the time. It reminds us that history is not just made of events and dates, but of lived experiences, of moments of hope betrayed and lives cut short. Her story encapsulates the intersection of human vulnerability and systemic cruelty, and in doing so, it ensures that the lessons of the past remain vivid, urgent, and deeply human. By remembering what she endured, we honor not just her courage, but the countless others whose voices were silenced yet whose experiences demand to be understood, recounted, and never forgotten.